Chicago, 1929. A city already drenched in blood, booze, and corruption was about to witness a crime so brutal, so shocking, that it would forever change the way America saw organized crime. It happened on a cold February morning, inside a quiet garage on Clark Street. The world would remember it as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, the day Al Capone painted Chicago red. But this story doesn't begin with the sound of Tommy guns echoing across the city. It begins years earlier in a Chicago torn apart by Prohibition, where gangsters weren't just criminals, they were kings. When the government outlawed alcohol in 1920, it handed men like Capone a golden opportunity. Ordinary citizens still wanted to drink, and bootleggers were happy to supply them. Beer trucks rumbled through the city. Speakeasies sprouted on every corner. And the man who quickly rose to dominate it all was a stocky, sharp-dressed mobster from Brooklyn, Alphonse Capone. Capone wasn't the first gangster in Chicago, but he was the most ruthless. He didn't just run bootlegging operations. He built an empire. Gambling, prostitution, racketeering, every vice imaginable flowed through his hands. By his late 20s, he was already one of the most powerful men in America. His headquarters at the Lexington Hotel became the nerve center of Chicago's underworld, a place where gangland murders could be ordered as casually as a dinner reservation. But power like that doesn't come without enemies. And Capone's greatest rival was a tall, cold-blooded gangster named George Bugs Moran. Moran led the North Side Gang, a crew just as violent, just as hungry for control. The city wasn't big enough for both of them. What followed was years of open warfare. Drive-by shootings, bombings, bodies left in alleys. The streets of Chicago became a battlefield, where ordinary citizens lived in fear of catching a stray bullet. Capone and Moran's men hunted each other relentlessly. Each ambush answered with another, each murder demanding revenge. By 1929, the tension had reached a boiling point. Moran controlled lucrative territory, including speakeasies and smuggling routes that Capone desperately wanted. But Moran had also humiliated Capone, taunting him in public, mocking his scars, and openly challenging his dominance. Capone decided it was time to end the war once and for all. And so the plan was hatched not just to kill Moran but to send a message to anyone who dared oppose Capone. A message written in gunfire. February 14, 1929. Valentine's Day. Chicago was locked in winter's grip, the streets covered in slush and ice. At 10:30 in the morning, members of the North Side Gang gathered at a warehouse at 2122 North Clark Street. They thought they were meeting to take delivery of hijacked liquor, a major score that could put cash in their pockets and keep their businesses flowing. What they didn't know was that Capone's men had set a trap. As Moran's men waited inside, a police car pulled up outside the garage. Out stepped several men in trench coats and hats, two of them dressed as uniformed officers. To the men inside, it looked like just another police raid, common in those days and usually nothing a few bribes couldn't fix. The officers barked orders. Moran's men were lined up against the wall, thinking they were about to be shaken down. But then came the sound that would echo in history, the roar of Tommy guns. Bullets ripped through the garage. Walls were shredded, bodies torn apart. In less than 10 seconds, it was over. 7 men lay dead or dying on the cold concrete floor. The killers calmly walked out, staged a fake arrest of their partners to look like a police operation, and vanished into the city. The victims included Moran's top lieutenants, men critical to his power. But in a twist of fate, Moran himself wasn't there. He had been running late that morning, and when he saw the police car outside the garage from a distance, he turned back, thinking it was a real raid. That twist of luck saved his life but destroyed his empire. The massacre stunned Chicago. Photos of the bloody crime scene hit newspapers across the nation, horrifying readers who had never seen such brazen violence. America had tolerated Prohibition-era gangsters, sometimes even admired them, but this was something different. This was war, and the public demanded answers. Police swarmed the city, but no one was ever convicted for the massacre. The killers vanished, protected by layers of silence and fear. Everyone knew Capone had ordered it, but proving it was another matter. Still, the damage to his reputation was done. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre was meant to eliminate Capone's enemies, but it had another effect. It turned the full attention of the United States government onto him. Chicago wasn't just seen as corrupt anymore. It was seen as lawless, out of control, a place where mobsters murdered with impunity. Something had to be done. President Herbert Hoover personally demanded Capone be taken down. And so began the campaign that would end the reign of the most famous gangster in American history. At first, Capone didn't take it seriously. He continued living like a celebrity, wearing tailored suits, hosting parties, and appearing in newspapers with a grin and a cigar. He even played into the role of Robin Hood, handing out food to the poor during the Great Depression. But behind the scenes, federal agents were quietly building their case. One of those agents was Eliot Ness, a young, incorruptible prohibition officer. Ness assembled a small team of men who couldn't be bribed, rare in a city where corruption ran deep. The press nicknamed them the Untouchables. They raided Capone's breweries, smashed his trucks, and disrupted his supply chains. But while Ness was making headlines, another team was preparing the real weapon that would bring Capone down. It wasn't bullets. It wasn't prohibition charges. It was taxes. Capone had never paid a cent in income tax, despite living like royalty. The government strategy was simple. Prove that his extravagant lifestyle couldn't be explained without illegal income, and convict him for tax evasion. It sounded almost ridiculous. How could a man responsible for hundreds of murders, countless crimes, and the bloodiest massacre in Chicago's history be brought down by paperwork? But the strategy worked. Investigators uncovered ledgers, found witnesses, and built a case that Capone couldn't escape. In October 1931, Capone went to trial. It was a spectacle, the trial of the century. Capone tried to bribe the jury, just as he had done before. But in a stunning move, the judge swapped the entire jury pool at the last minute, replacing them with men Capone hadn't reached. The defense had no chance. Capone was found guilty on 5 counts of tax evasion and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, the harshest tax sentence in American history at that time. For a man who thought he was untouchable, it was a devastating blow. He was first sent to Atlanta, where he tried to bribe guards and live in comfort. But the government wasn't done. In 1934, Capone was transferred to the brand-new Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, a fortress built to break men like him. At Alcatraz, Capone was no king. He was just another inmate, stripped of power and forgotten by the empire he had built. The man who once ruled Chicago's underworld now scrubbed laundry and stared across the cold waters of San Francisco Bay. Worse still, Capone's health began to crumble. Years of untreated syphilis ate away at his brain, leaving him confused and childlike. Inmates mocked him. Guards pitied him. The man who had orchestrated massacres could no longer even care for himself. By 1939, his condition was so bad that he was released early. He returned to his mansion in Florida, but he was a shell of the man he had been. He spent his days fishing, gardening, and rambling incoherently. Sometimes he didn't even remember who he was. On January 25, 1947, at the age of just 48, Al Capone died. Not in a blaze of glory, not in a hail of bullets, but quietly, weakened and broken, surrounded by family. And yet his name lives on. Al Capone became a legend, his life immortalized in movies, books, and television. But behind the myth lies the truth. His empire was built on blood, and his downfall began the moment he ordered the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Because in trying to eliminate his enemies, Capone revealed himself to the world. He wanted to be feared. He wanted to be untouchable. Instead, he became the symbol of why no gangster, no matter how powerful, could escape justice forever. But if the St. Valentine's Day Massacre ended Capone's reign, it also left behind a haunting question. Did the massacre truly end the era of mob rule in Chicago? Or did it simply open the door for the next ruthless generation to rise? That answer, like the massacre itself, remains shrouded in the shadows of history. If you love this story, like, share, and subscribe to the channel.